All righty, I have top of the hour, which is when we said we would start, and we have a packed agenda and a short amount of time. So I'll go ahead and kick us off. My name is Bea Covington. I'm the Global Partnerships Director for Amplio. I have an educational background in adult education and communication, as well as agricultural extension. That's who I am. I'll introduce the rest of our team shortly, but first I want to welcome you all and thank you for coming and take care of a couple of housekeeping notes. The session is being recorded and we will make it available to you afterwards. Everyone who pre-registered should have received copies of 3 fictional situational case situations. We'll be using those in our breakout rooms during the second half of the session. Shortly, those case study PDFs will appear in your chat, in the chat for the main room. We will also have them available once you go into your breakout room. So if you didn't get the download, or if you didn't get a chance to download and read it, that's okay. There will be time for you to do that. When the time comes, you will be able to self-select which breakout room you would like to attend. One will be focused on agriculture, one will be focused on humanitarian and response, and the third will be focused on civic engagement. After the session has concluded, you will be automatically returned to the main session where we'll briefly wrap up. And then as a follow-up, we will send to all of you all of the materials from all of the case study rooms. So you don't have to worry that if you are in one room, you won't be able to find out what happened in another room. So I wanted to make everybody aware of that. I also wanted to make everybody aware that the case scenarios that we're using for the purposes of today's discussion are based on real life applications of talking books, or hybrids of several real life applications where talking books and multiple communication modalities have been used. And we will also be sending you materials on those actual situations so that you will have that as well going forward. As we're in the main area, in the main room for the first part of the workshop, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We will try to answer them as we can. Once again, if we're not able to get to a question or a comment, we will follow up with you to address whatever issue or point you are raising, and where appropriate, we'll share those comments and observations with the entire audience. Our goal really is to encourage discussion in the small groups. So each group moderator will be managing their group in a way that is best able to enable that, depending on the size of the group. So without further delay, we will get to it, and let me introduce the rest of our team. Next slide. So there we go. We've talked a little bit today about what we are going to be doing, and this is our team. I've already introduced myself. Lindsay Dakin is the Global Partnerships Program Manager. She has been with Amplio for the better part of a year, and she supports all of our current Amplio program partners, providing training and management for talking book programs. Lily joins us from one of our partners, Farmerline, and she has rich experience in digital extension, having trained more than 200,000 small-scale farmers to adopt and benefit Farmerline's voice messaging technology. She's also led a research project to help identify the best training combination and groups of media to influence behavior change among farmers. Guma is the director of our Ghana country office. He has led projects and teams and strategies across multiple issues, working with livelihoods, food security, climate change, health, water, health and sanitation, disaster management, and governance. And he and his team in Ghana provide direct project support to programs in Ghana and in Western Africa. Lisa Zook manages and supports the monitoring and evaluation for our Talking Book program partners. She's worked with Save the Children, RTI, World Vision, a number of large organizations, and she is the co-founder of the Seattle Evaluation Association. Okay, next slide. All right, so today we're going to be talking about designing behavior change communication interventions that are multi-layered. And as a bit of a background, I first became aware of the idea of behavior change communication studying agricultural extension, education, and communication in graduate school. And in that context, Everett Rogers and his diffusion of innovation theory, which came about in 1962, was a very popular way to explain the notion that over time, an idea or a product or a project can gain momentum, and it diffuses and spreads through a population or a social system. And the end result of that diffusion is that people who are part of a social system adopt a new idea, a behavior, or a particular product. And adoption means that a person does something differently than what they had been previously doing. And as we all know from our work, it's not just about encouraging people to wash their hands after they have defecated or helping them understand how to plant crops in mounds rather than broadcasting seeds, as an example. Behavior change can also be about choosing to engage in an electoral process or demanding to have title to land in an environment where you hadn't known that that was an option for you before. And so clearly, agricultural extension is not the only arena where we're trying to get people to adopt new ways of doing things. And certainly Everett Rogers was not the only person exploring pathways and developing theories as to why and how people make choices and decisions, and more importantly, how they make new choices and new decisions that lead to better outcomes, either for their physical or mental health, for their food security, for their livelihood, or even for their safety. Obviously, we've learned a lot since Everett Rogers in 1962, and there has been a lot of very concentrated, deliberate, thoughtful work around how people receive information and process it, and then turn that information into actionable change. And we have a much better understanding of the relationships between individuals and the environments and the larger environments where they live and work, and how those layers work together to influence choice and decision making. And those discussions are a whole other set of webinars. And I'm sure many of you who are on the workshop with us today are experts in this field and have a lot of experience in this particular realm. So we're not going to spend a lot of our time unpacking and evaluating and examining these different theories and approaches. Our goal today is really to focus on how and which communication methods we choose to engage our target population, whatever the topic is that we happen to be considering. This is a framework that you are looking at that gives you a large overview of the process that we go through, beginning with a formative assessment and understanding our situation and our audience, and then in relationship to that information that we get in that assessment phase, coming up with a strategic framework, and then ultimately developing messaging and content. And so we're going to be focusing more specifically on this middle box. So next slide. Yeah. And within that middle box of developing a strategic framework, we are actually going to be focused more specifically on approaches, and what are the different approaches and combinations of approaches that we would like to use in order to get that information in front of our target audience so that they can absorb it and process it and apply it. And to dive a little bit deeper into these approaches and what their alternatives are, I'm going to turn the webinar over to my colleague, Lindsay.
Thank you, Bea, and hello, everybody. So you can go to the next slide, Lisa. So, right, as Bea just described, once you've gone through those initial stages of doing your formative assessment and you've identified your target audience and also the behavior change outcomes that you want to reach, how do you choose the best communication approaches to reach those goals? So I'm going to walk you through some things to consider when you're thinking about all of that. So next slide, Lisa. So right, when considering what approaches might be most appropriate, there are a series of questions that you and your project team can ask yourselves. And I'll just run through those kind of quickly, but we'll kind of dive more into these questions in the breakout rooms when we're looking at the case studies. So first, you can look at what gaps or barriers in access might your target audience face to accessing the information or the messages that you want to communicate. So for example, internet connectivity and mobile phone access. We do know that currently about 30% of the global population does not have mobile phone access and 40% does not have internet access. So obviously that's probably going to be a huge barrier for a lot of the folks in your target audiences. You also might want to consider literacy rates. And in this, I also like to include digital literacy, excuse me, which is how fluent your target audience is with working with different technologies or different communications platforms. And so then what capacity building or skills building might you need to do to lay the groundwork if you're introducing any new technologies in order to ensure maximum uptake and engagement with your messages. You can also consider any language barriers. Of course, we know that many people in our target audiences are going to be speaking local dialects, but a lot of mass media is often in a national language, which of course restricts access to information. So being able to deliver content in local languages can be very, very powerful. And then gender, of course, you want to look at, are there any restrictive gender norms in your context around women's access to information or digital technologies? And how might you think about reaching women in particular in the most sensitive and inclusive way possible? The next set of questions you want to consider are around when and where you can best reach your audience. So we want to make sure that the uptake of your messages is as easy and convenient as possible, and to reach your audience where they're at, so to speak. So when considering when your audience is available, you might want to consider if there are any time constraints. We know, especially in terms of gender, women are very busy. They have a lot of things to do in their day. And so how can you be sensitive about the amount of time you might be asking your audience to spend with you, or when might be the most convenient time to reach them? The other thing in terms of where to reach your audience, you can think physically in terms of where are they? Are they at home or in the market or in church or in other community gathering spaces? But you can also think in terms of where they are, in terms of what communications platforms are they already engaging with. So maybe radio or mobile phones or smartphones, which apps on smartphones do people use? So you can try to look into the current uptake among your target audience and right, just try to identify where your audience is already engaged and how you can find them there. The next thing you want to consider is how sticky or complex or sensitive the norms and behaviors that you're trying to change are. And that will inform how deep you need to go with your intervention. For example, is it just a matter of giving people a piece of information that they can easily be able to act upon? Or do you need to do maybe more discussion, deeper engagement to shift more entrenched or complex norms and behaviors? For example, gender norms are often falling into the more complex category to do a lot of work to try to shift, or even nutrition is also can be very entrenched and sticky to shift. The last thing you want to consider, of course, that we always need to consider in any of our interventions is what resources you have available or what you might need to put in place to achieve your objectives. So budget constraints, any budget constraints you might be working within, or what reach and scaling goals you might have, and also what staff or volunteer capacity you might be able to tap into. So for example, is your project team already well-versed in implementing some of these communications platforms, or will you need to do some capacity building if you're introducing any new technology? And also, who do you have at the community level who you can engage to help share your messages and spread your messages? Maybe local leaders, or are there group structures, maybe group leaders, etc. So you can go to the next slide. I do want to acknowledge that usually no single approach is going to address all of the needs that might have surfaced when you have been asking yourself those questions. So it's often going to be most effective if you can use mixed approaches when you're designing your communications interventions. So the first point is you want to look at targeting different levels of the socioecological model. So from the individual level to family and community, and even maybe institutional and policy levels, depending on the goals of your intervention. And doing that multi-level approach will often lead to the deepest and most lasting impact. And also just keeping in mind that different audiences are likely going to require different approaches, and using mixed approaches will help you to reinforce your messages and increase your reach. So for example, you might be able to follow an in-person agriculture training session with some SMS messages to help remind and reinforce the information that you shared during that session. Or you might think about using talking books to spark discussion at the household level about land rights, supplementing maybe a weekly radio program that is also being broadcast around those same topics. This is illustrated a little bit more on the next slide. Let's move on to the next slide. So here we have just a bit of comparison between some of the most common communication approaches out there and how they address some of those questions that I discussed earlier about barriers in access, or where they can reach folks, or the level of engagement that these different platforms might offer. So all of these platforms and approaches have different strengths and weaknesses and different things they can offer to your audiences. So for example, radio is great at reaching mass audiences with low literacy levels. But SMS, where it might be more limited in terms of literacy, will offer an opportunity for more data collection and maybe two-way communication through user feedback. So as much as you can integrate complementary approaches into your intervention and have them work in tandem, you're going to fill those gaps as much as possible and reinforce your messages, increase your reach, and ultimately give you the deepest impact possible. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lily with Farmerline, and she's going to describe some of the work that Farmerline has done in implementing this kind of multi-layered approach. So go ahead, Lily.
So Lindsay has mentioned a number of tools or approaches that have been used and are being adopted from various places. In Farmerline, we others to understand which approaches to consider for which context. So we realized that for in-person training, for instance, it's best when message you want to transfer to your target audience. So first layer could be the in-person, that there's a lot of reinforcement of the message. Could also be, you would also want to consider a talking book for the various groups that you are targeting. Also combining such with voice messaging platform, which is going to cover the literacy aspect when you use the local dialects of the target group. That makes you able to also reach a larger group, or have a more reach to, and also like reduce the cost in terms of reaching these people and ensuring that there's a lot of enforcement of the messages that you are passing on to them. We also tried out combining voice messages and then talking book, and we realized that having these two together is very useful. Probably educate people about COVID-19, especially when it had first started. You would want to use such platforms to reach more people as well. And then also combining different types. So you could have a combination of have access to phones, or even have voice messaging as well, and have a system like a virtual call center where people can easily call in to have their questions answered, and to also increase the level of engagement and a lot of touch points, which would essentially increase the impact that you want to make in changing the behavior of the target group. I'll hand over to Guma to speak more on the talking books.
Thank you, Lily. And basically just to provide some more information about the talking book device. So let's look at the unique features of the talking book device, which is one of the communication tools that partners can apply in their communication campaigns or social and behavior change activities. This particular device, an audio device, it runs on dry cells and also rechargeable batteries. It has a speaker that allows basically a group of about 25 to even 50 people to listen to the messages. It has an inbuilt microphone, and the microphone allows users or beneficiaries to track feedback. Basically, this device, one of the unique functions of it is a feedback mechanism where users or beneficiaries can use to provide a program staff or partners feedback regarding the program. It has a USB port, and this allows basically all the software regarding this device to be made possible. For example, loading content or retrieving usage statistics, the USB port makes that possible. The key part of it, if you look at it, is quite different from what you find. For example, you compare that to a mobile phone, a tablet. You see, mobile phones will have basically enumerated values or letters. However, if you look at, compare that to a token book, this basically has symbols. These are symbols that people in very hard to reach settings or communities can easily relate with. And it doesn't require someone to have numeracy skills or literacy, to be literate in order to be able to operate this device. And next slide, please. So what are the unique advantages of the token book device? As mentioned before, suitable for low literate users. This device is able to store a lot of content and that can be delivered for several hours. Also, as mentioned before, it has a mechanism that is able to collect how the device is performing. For example, we are able to know how much the device has worked, how many of the messages were listened to, were they listened to completion or halfway or partially, which of the messages were listened more as compared to the others. All this, the device is able to track that effectively. And above all, there's a feedback mechanism or system or function in the device that allows users or beneficiaries to be able to provide feedback. It could be feedback related to the current program that they are being targeted for, or could be any issue in their community. And people or beneficiaries use this to be able to either ask questions, make complaints, or even endorse some of the messages that they have listened to. Last but not the least, it is a device that is equitable, it's an inclusive tool, neutral technology for a marginalized groups such as women. Next slide. So how can we apply the token book? So we can use token books in households. Typically, token books can rotate among households in the community. Token books can also be used in groups such as village savings and loans associations, which are quite common in Africa or certain parts of the world. You can use token books in groups such as mother-to-mother support group, youth groups, and what have you. You can also use token books with committee level structures. For example, committee of workers can use token books to undertake home visits where they can move or visit households or homes to be able to educate people about whatever issue that they're working on. For example, in Ghana, currently, we are using the token books with the Committee of Volunteers and the Committee Health Planning and Services, the CHIPS facilities, nurses there to undertake outreach sessions where they use the token books to undertake health promotion activities. So you can use token books in that way. Last but not least, you can also place token books in certain locations or facilities. It could be in a classroom, it could be a health facility where people who attend or who visit these facilities can have the opportunity to listen to the token books. Thank you, and over to you, Dee.
Great. As we've already indicated, there are a number of different sectors where talking books can be used and where multi-layered approaches are appropriate. And so what I will do now, I think, because I know I want to get everybody time to go into the breakout rooms and get started and having some conversations about these different ways to approach engaging target audiences. And so Aaron, if you would turn on the breakout rooms and folks can self-select into those breakout rooms. Molly has put a question in the chat and I will respond to that. So you'll have that available to you when you come back. A short answer, the current cost for a talking book is $49 for the device. And in addition to that, there is a $3 per book per month service fee that covers all of the wraparound services to help your device operate. And let's see, what was the other question, other point? Availability. Depending on your project and your program, we have talking books available, stored in different places around, particularly in Africa, so we can get them to you. Basically, it's the time it takes to ship them to you. So that's a short answer. All righty, I think everybody is back from the breakout rooms by and large. From the conversations I heard as I was moving through them, there was lots of rich discussion, and I think we have some interesting solutions. Right quick, Lily, can you tell me what the agriculture group, what conclusions you all came to in terms of what types of technologies you would use and why?
Yeah, so I think some of the suggestions that came up were posters heavy with image that portrayed like technical information that'll be useful for the farmers, and then also videos as well. I think mainly the choice of these tools or approaches were because of the high illiteracy rate of the target group, and also the fact that most of them speak local dialects. So it would be good to have the information in their local dialects for easy understanding. And we also appreciated that it had to be a multi-layered approach. So not just one particular communication tool, but having different types to use.
So great, thanks. And these are not single answers, and in some cases the answer is not immediately evident. And with that in mind, Lindsay, you want to tell us what your group thought about?
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time talking about the complexity of our situation, which is around, building trust in an electoral system and building engagement and ultimately, voter participation in a pretty complex environment. So yeah, we spent a good amount of time talking about, do we want to play the long game versus the short game? This is going to be maybe quite a time-intensive intervention that's going to take a lot of time and effort to start to shift behaviors. And so, yeah, we definitely recognize that there's a long game involved. But we did talk a little bit about talking books having potential, especially with the barriers in connectivity and existing communications, engagement with communications platforms. So talking books maybe having a place to bring those into community groups at the hyper local level and start to just shift kind of perspectives and trust in the democratic system.
Great, thanks. Guma, how about your group? What did you all consider in the context of a humanitarian response in a refugee environment?
So in our group, similar to what others did, we also went through the context driving that basically is that was driving our choice of various solutions. And we felt that we needed a technology that would not require the use of internet because of the internet problems in the area where the intervention is. So we proposed the use of the talking book. We also said we could use the radio as well as SMS because some of the men do have mobile phones and we could target men through that. All in all, I think that we also consider the fact that we needed technology that could allow the target audience to receive messages in their respective local dialect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Yeah, I think the common thread through all of these has been that context matters, and the unique characteristics of the situation matter, and the ultimate outcome that you're trying to achieve matters. And it's a very complex, complicated thing. And you're not going to necessarily use one approach all the time. And it's very important in your planning to take the time to unpack and tease out all of these different layers and identify technologies either in a layered approach or in a sequential approach that you can utilize to effectively engage your population to get the information in their hands. And there are a number of different technologies out there that can be used. Talking books are one of them. Farmerline has some amazing platforms that they've created to work in the agricultural extension space. And I think the take home for us is that we would like for everyone to think critically about these things and to explore all kinds of different technologies that might be appropriate in the context that you're working in. Next slide, Lisa. So if you are interested in doing a deeper dive into how the talking book might facilitate the work that you are doing, you can reach out to us at partnerships@amplio.org. And if you are particularly interested in the work that Farmerline is doing in the agricultural extension space, you can reach out to them and they would be more than happy to spend more time doing a deep dive with you on their approach and their services and the multiple layers of their platforms. I want to thank everyone for coming. And as I said earlier at the beginning, we will be sending out, there will be this session has been recorded. We will make that available. The slide deck that we've used will be made available. And we will also make available the foundational case studies for all of the breakout rooms, as well as the underlying real life situations that motivated the creation of those fictitious case exercises. And we thank you for your time and we hope you have a wonderful day. And thank you very much.